Now I am single, Dad. The words taste strange, heavy and liberating all at once as they leave my mouth. I never imagined I'd have to claim that title. Not here, not with a crown on my head and corridors echoing my every step. The palace feels different since she left, quieter yet somehow fuller, with the sound of my child's laughter ricocheting through stone halls that once held only the measured cadence of duty. There is a new rhythm to my mornings, tiny hands tugging at my sleeve as sunlight pools over marble floors, the scent of porridge replacing polished leather and parchment. I am a father first now, before prince, before heir, and that truth is as terrifying as it is grounding. At night, when the world outside our chambers falls asleep, I sit by the crib and watch the steady rise and fall of a small chest. I marvel at how someone so little could be the anchor holding me steady against tides of expectation and grief. Courtiers still shuffle outside the door, their whispers a language of alliances and appearances. But here inside, their noise cannot breach the quiet bond between us. I sing lullabies I never knew I carried inside me, words that belong only to this child and me, fragments of an unspoken vow that I will guard their joy even if the walls around us crumble. There are days when loneliness creeps in like fog through the courtyard. I see other fathers with partners beside them, and for a heartbeat, I wonder if I failed, if my love was too fragile to survive the storms that royalty summons. Yet, when those thoughts bite, I remind myself of the resilience etched in the lines of my palms. My journey is not defined by who stayed or who fled. It is shaped by the hands I now hold, by the eyes that look up at me with trust untainted by politics or betrayal. That gaze is a command stronger than any royal decree. To be present, to be brave, to be whole. I do not know what the future will demand from me, or whether someone new will someday walk these corridors beside us. But I do know this. The throne may sit waiting, the council may drone on about duty and succession, yet every decision I make will first answer to the quiet heartbeat that sleeps against my chest. That is my kingdom now. A realm built not of stone and ceremony, but of bedtime stories, steady arms, and a promise that no storm, no scandal, no shadow will come between a father and the life he has sworn to protect. Every dawn now feels less like the continuation of a royal routine, and more like the opening chapter of a tale I never knew I was brave enough to live. When I wake, sunlight slips through the brocade curtains and pools at the foot of a bed where tiny shoes and wooden knights lie scattered, silent evidence of a life reshaped overnight. There's no herald or trumpet for this new role, only the soft tug at my sleeve, asking if breakfast can be eaten in the garden instead of at the long ceremonial table. And so I find myself abandoning silver trays for buttered bread on a blanket, learning that true majesty is hidden in the way a child grins when crumbs dot my velvet cloak. I've begun to speak differently to those who once believed I was carved from the same marble as the palace columns. I tell them, with a steadiness born of sleepless nights, that power has no meaning if it doesn't bend toward protection. They study my face, expecting the old language of strategy and alliances, but I offer stories of small triumphs, a first laugh after a day of tears, a brave attempt at climbing the library steps alone. Somehow these anecdotes reach further than proclamations ever could. They whisper of a ruler whose heartbeat is tethered to something far purer than the hunger for control. And when twilight comes, after the last guard has made his round and the echo of ceremony dies down, I gather my child's toys from the throne room floor. In that stillness I speak aloud to the ghosts of kings and queens whose portraits stare from the walls. I tell them that I understand their sacrifices now, but that I intend to write a new chapter. One where tenderness stands beside duty without apology. I promise them that the future of our line will not be secured by fear or rigid protocol, but by a steady hand that knows when to shield and when to let go. Their painted eyes seem to soften in the flicker of the candelabra, as though giving quiet blessing to a man who has chosen love as the boldest crown of all. Of course, here are two more long, engaging paragraphs continuing the same heartfelt speech from the prince's point of view. Sometimes, as I watch him chase a paper kite through the courtyard, I'm struck by how fragile yet unstoppable hope can be. The same stones that once felt like a cage now stand as a fortress around a future I refuse to let slip through my fingers. I find myself negotiating treaties in the morning and kneeling in the grass by afternoon, helping small hands tie knots strong enough to hold the wind. There's a lesson hidden in that balance, that a ruler's greatness is not measured in the weight of his crown, but in how lightly he can carry the happiness of those who depend on him. Even the whispers of court intrigue lose their edge when I see sunlight catch in his hair. They remind me that power is only meaningful when it safeguards wonder. On nights when sleep evades me, I wander the halls with him tucked safely in my arms, his breath warm against my collar. The portraits lining the corridors seem to lean closer, as if listening to the promises I make under my breath, that I will raise him to be braver than doubt, kinder than ambition, freer than any chain tradition could forge. I speak as though history itself is a witness, vowing that the next chapter of our lineage will be written not in rigid law, but in laughter, resilience, and quiet acts of devotion. In those moments, the vastness of my responsibility no longer frightens me. It steadies me, reminding me that leadership and love were never meant to live apart. Every time I step into the grand hall, the echo of my boots against the marble reminds me of how vast this palace feels without another adult voice beside me. The chandeliers blaze with 100 candles, but their brilliance cannot warm the quiet that stretches between these walls. I have learned to speak to that silence, to fill it with stories for the little one who clutches my finger as though it were a lifeline. My speeches to ministers are measured and careful, but the words I offer this child are unguarded, woven from pieces of my soul I never dared to show the court. They deserve a father who is not a shadow behind a crown, but a living man who can laugh at spilled milk and kneel in the dust of the gardens to build castles that no storm can sweep away. Sometimes, when the court gathers to watch us cross the courtyard, I feel the weight of their eyes, heavy with speculation. They look at the child as if a mystery has settled on our dynasty, and I can almost hear their questions humming under the surface. Will he grow to carry his father's burdens? Will the prince still be able to rule with a toddler on his hip? I answer them without words by lifting my son high into the air until he shrieks with unfiltered delight. That laughter slices through their whispers like a blade, reminding me, that life is not a ledger of obligations. It is a chance to build something gentle in the midst of relentless protocol. There are nights when the loneliness presses close, thick as the velvet curtains drawn across my windows. I pour myself a drink I rarely finish and sit by the fire, watching the flames dance like restless courtiers. I talk to the empty room, telling it how the world outside may judge, how some might question whether I can be both sovereign and sole parent. Then I imagine my child's future self hearing those doubts and answering with the same unwavering certainty I try to embody now. My father gave me every piece of his heart, and that was more than enough. That thought steadies me more than any toast raised in the council chambers. I have begun to see this role not as a compromise, but as a privilege stitched with challenges. Each morning brings a new test of patience, of tenderness, of courage, and each time I rise to meet it, I feel a strange kind of freedom blooming beneath the ancient weight of my title. Perhaps this is what true leadership has always meant, not the applause of subjects or the security of treaties, but the quiet, steadfast shaping of another life. In the hush before dawn, when small fingers wrap around mine in sleep, I know with absolute clarity that I am exactly where I need to be, carrying the most important duty I will ever hold. The corridors echo with more than footsteps now. They echo with the rhythm of our days, the patter of small feet chasing mine, the spontaneous giggles that ricochet off stone walls built for stern proclamation. I find myself addressing these halls as though they were confidants, explaining to them how a single child can rearrange the entire architecture of a man's soul. When I speak, my words are not clipped commands or carefully weighed pronouncements for state affairs. They are living, breathing sentences meant to convince an ancient palace that joy and duty can inhabit the same body. I tell the portraits of my ancestors that the kingdom they left me is not just in parchment laws or jeweled crowns, but also in the smile that greets me when I stoop to lift a toy horse from the floor. Even council meetings have taken on a new timbre. As courtiers debate matters of trade or treaties, I sometimes see my son's tiny handprint smeared across the corner of my briefing notes, and it steadies me better than any statistic or chart could. It is a reminder that beyond the polished tables and heavy curtains lies a heartbeat depending on my steadiness. I speak more boldly now, not only because I want to guide my people, but because I know every decision will shape the world my child will inherit. My voice has acquired a new resonance, a blend of steel and warmth, born from the knowledge that leadership is meaningless if it cannot also safeguard a single fragile life. Evenings bring a quieter kind of revelation. When the palace grows still and only the faintest glow remains from the lanterns, I find myself crafting bedtime stories that outshine the grandeur of the court. They are tales of kindness disguised as adventure, of bravery stitched with tenderness, of rulers who lead not by the height of their throne, but by the depth of their compassion. Speaking them aloud, I realize they are lessons as much for me as for the little listener curled against my chest. They teach me to strip away layers of ceremony and meet the night as a man who has chosen to love fearlessly despite titles, despite scrutiny. There are still moments when shadows gather at the edge of these revelations, moments when I wonder if I will be enough,